Well, good morning and good afternoon to you in the East Coast, and welcome to our One Commercial Partner Modern Workplace Productivity U.S. Partner Community Call. We appreciate you joining us today. And this is our call for November, where we're going to be talking about the SharePoint Framework and patterns and practices today. So just a quick agenda. We're going to have our usual U.S. partner community welcome, and then we're going to get right into our topic. We have Vesa Juvonen. He's a senior program manager at Microsoft. I know many of you may be familiar with Vesa and his work, and I'm really fortunate to have him on the call today. And go ahead and type in your questions in the Q&A window, and if there's something that I can't answer, I'll go ahead and queue that up on the call for you. So a couple of changes in our community. You may have noticed if you've been out to the Yammer site, we have some rebranding where we're really aligning more with how we're going to market and how we're organized here in One Commercial Partner. So we have the some vanity URLs for you, and I'll have a copy of this deck once we're through with the call. And know that you can always view this call again on demand, usually a couple of hours after we record it. And we also post it up to our YouTube playlist. So the aka.ms hot sheet news, that's the usual hot sheet that you may be familiar with, where you can really get a view into all the training and events that are happening for partners across all of our different communities. And we have a new URL for the Modern Workplace Technical Yammer community. So that's formerly the Office 365 and Voice group. It's the same network. We just have a new name, and we're doing some consolidation where we're bringing in the Windows and devices and the enterprise mobility and security under one Yammer group. So you may notice some changes there and some additional members. So we're about 2,500 partners strong right now, and so that number probably will be growing as we kind of continue to merge these communities. And you can find the calls for all of Modern Workplace at US Modern Workplace Call, and that will be updated. And so, but hold on to that URL, because you're going to start seeing all the calls populated there out for the rest of the fiscal year. So you can see what's happening not only in the productivity space, but in Windows devices and enterprise mobility and security. And you can get to our community blog at aka.ms/US blog. All right, so at this point, I'm going to introduce Vesa, and thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late for you, and so I appreciate that a lot. And I'm really looking forward to presenting this content, because what I found is I talked to many partners, and a lot of them are really kind of developing SharePoint in the way that they've always done it. And SharePoint has really been modernizing. And with the release of the SharePoint Framework, I was really kind of struck by Dan Kogan's session. And you can view those Ignite sessions going out to My Ignite and taking a look at the video library. And he was saying that the SharePoint Framework is really now the de facto way of being able to build solutions out on SharePoint and being able to create those experiences. And that was really interesting to me. And yes, there are still a few scenarios that they may not be able to cover, but that's really where you should start. And a great way to be able to take advantage of that is really through the patterns and practices and all the content they have. And they have code samples. They have amazing training resources for you to be able to get started. And so Vesa, I mean, we have like the PnP code from PnP is literally on thousands of Office 365 tenants today. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah. So technically we don't know on how many tenants people are using our samples or conclusions out of our sample, but we're tracking some level of usage on certain components, and we know that it's tens of thousands of tenants where people are using our reusable components, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Well, I think it's very timely, and so it's great to have you on and share these resources with us. So appreciate it and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Cool. So I'm going to actually share, take over the presentation as well. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, and that's probably the right thing to click in the Skype, so we can actually get my slides available. And apparently, now that Michael can actually ask who I am. Well, Michael already explains who I am, but I'm going to quickly explain slightly more. My name is not author and name, and I'm not working in a company called Date. So I missed that one on the presentation. But yeah, so just to clarify, so Michael was explaining around Dan in his intro as well. Dan is the bold guy in the middle picture, and he's my manager. So I work in the Splat team, which is internal organization name in SharePoint engineering, and the Splat team owns SharePoint Framework. We actually own also the whole SharePoint development story. We own server APIs, client-side object model APIs, REST APIs, guidance, documentation, and everything. Personally, I own SharePoint development documentation and communities and a few features in SharePoint Framework and so on. So I work in that team. I do tend to, well, I have, based on my role as being the community guy, I need to drop by in Ignites and Build and other conferences always to talk about these things, which is fine for me. I've been doing that for years. So I started personally in Microsoft back in 2006. I have a, how would I put it? Michael was just asking me on this one before we started that, how did you ended up in SharePoint engineering? I have a slightly strange story. We're not going to go through the whole story, but I started as a actual MCS consultant back in 2006 in Finland, subsidiary of Microsoft. And then after 10 years or 8 years, I ended up in Redmond organization, which is weird, but these things do happen. So cool. Anything else that we want to talk about here, Michael, or should I just take it away?
Yeah, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So let's actually get it ongoing. Before we go to the SharePoint, our marketing people always want us to do the marketing pitch for the whole Office 365 as well. And this is actually super important to understand. If you're more in the on-premises and have been doing on-premises and looking into SharePoint Online, you should be always remembering that it's not really just about the SharePoint Online. There's actually a lot of other services in Office 365. The SharePoint is no doubt one of the most successful ones and its most popular ones because we have such a big history within the SharePoint with on-premises and then gradually moving into enabling the on-premises product in the cloud. But there's a lot of other services in Office 365 as well. And more in the future, we're using the Microsoft Graph as the fundamental API platform in the Office 365 because that actually gives us access to all of the data and intelligence and all of that stuff. So it's not just about SharePoint. That's the key point of this slide. I'm not going to deep dive on the thinking of this one and the marketing messages too much because I'm from engineering. I don't need to do that. But really think about the cloud as not just SharePoint Online. There's a massive amount of other opportunities, and SharePoint Online is, yes, big piece of the puzzle, but it actually gets much more interesting when you start thinking what's the stuff outside of the SharePoint Online puzzle as well, or outside of SharePoint Online service as well. Now, what I wanted to do for this session, before I actually deep dive on all of the assets and all of the things what we have available, we promised to do SharePoint Framework and SharePoint PnP. So I'm going to actually do the SharePoint Framework piece at the deep dive by showing you one roadmap. So I will do demos around the SharePoint Framework. I will show assets around the SharePoint Framework. But what I wanted to do quickly to show also the speed of how we are evolving the SharePoint Framework and the modern experiences within the SharePoint Online. So in SharePoint Online, we actually shipped quite a lot of new capabilities in Ignite a week or even after the Ignite. So we already had one more release of SharePoint Framework happening after the Ignite. And there will be another release of SharePoint Framework within a few weeks, which is pretty cool. And well, let's put it this way. If you have a look on the conference calendar in the SharePoint area, there is a big conference happening in Dublin in a few weeks where Jeff Deeper is doing a keynote. I'm doing a dev keynote there. And that's where we will announce, again, additional capabilities. But in Ignite Week, we actually released SharePoint Framework in on-premises, a big thing. you can actually implement SharePoint Framework web parts in SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2. Somebody might be thinking that, hey, what does it mean that I have the modern experiences in the on-premises? And the answer is no, that's not what it actually means. It means that the web part experience and the web part implementations in SharePoint Framework can be used in the classic pages, in classic page context. The full modern experiences will land in on-premises within the next SharePoint on-premises release, which we have already announced, and that's going to happen on next year, 2018, and that's going to be called SharePoint 2019. And that will have then pretty much the full modern experience, which means also the UI changes from a SharePoint Framework perspective. We also released easily deployable web parts and extensions across your enterprise, across your tenant. We will release a new version of Yeoman Generator in which is the 1.3 version. Right now, yesterday we released already 1.3.4 version of the Yeoman Generator. We released SharePoint Framework extensions and their general availability, which actually enables you to do UI level customizations in modern SharePoint sites. So now you can actually embed your custom navigations and footers and headers on the modern sites as well, which wasn't, let's say, supported until the extensions went live. Tenant properties is the one thing which was released. Modern custom themes is now in preview as well, and Office UI Fabric Core support is enabled for SharePoint Framework. Now, what's coming soon is areas which we promised that will deliver by end of this calendar year, and that's pretty cool. We will have then multiple releases by end of this calendar year, and one of the capabilities will be more Microsoft Graph support. So you're able to access additional intelligence, additional information in the context of the user within your implementations. We'll have ALM APIs, so you're able to actually deploy your SharePoint add-ins or SharePoint Framework solutions using REST APIs to random site collections or all of your site collections, so you can automate all of the things. And we even have a video recording of that, the preview available for you if you're interested on that one. We'll have assets included in deployment packages, and what that one means, if you are familiar with SharePoint Framework, that one is a super cool capability. It means that you can actually get your SharePoint Framework web parts and extensions deployed to SharePoint without wondering where are you hosting those JavaScript files. So we'll host that stuff for you. Now, only thing what you need to do is deploy your package to the app catalog, and then depending on the settings, we're going to host those files either directly from the app catalog or from the CDN. So super cool stuff. And that's going to speed up and ease up your deployment story and all of that stuff. We'll have also a site-specific app catalog, which will allow you for scope deployment. Essentially, what it means is that, hey, quite often people have a global intranet and they want to have a slightly different web parts and extensions on a global intranet, but not on the collaboration sites. So you're able to enable a site collection-specific app catalog for intranet and enable specific functionalities there, which are not then available across all of the other tenants. Super cool. And then site designs with extensibility points. And this is more around, hey, we want to modernize also the classic site templating story. So how do I ensure that whenever an end user creates a new site collection, it will have my custom branding, it will have my custom story, my custom welcome page, and my text and everything else. And that's the site design and extensibility point. I'm going to demo that one during that one today, so you'll see what it actually means in practice. Now, let's actually get on going on the other stuff. So the other topic really, this was around SharePoint Framework and SharePoint PnP, and they really work together. They are part of the same bigger picture. But what I wanted to do quickly is explain what is actually SharePoint Patterns and Practices, because people are might be slightly confused what it is and what does it actually provide you. The SharePoint Patterns and Practices is actually SharePoint development ecosystem. So the SharePoint Patterns and Practices originally was an initiative that started with two guys started thinking that, hey, it is actually pretty stupid that we don't share our learnings and our guidance and our samples across the world. And why is everybody banging their head against the wall and try to figure out, how would I do that? Why somebody is saying that on.NET XML is a bad thing? And why somebody says that web template is a bad thing? So we started collecting ideas and samples and written down stuff, and we started sharing that. A few years later, it evolved to be something which is essentially now owning the whole end-to-end SharePoint development guidance and documentations and our sample thing. And what the SharePoint PnP essentially now controls is all of the learnings and all of the guidance around the SharePoint development. And I'm going to walk through what those are, because there's a lot of stuff for you which will help you to learn how to do SharePoint customizations in a recommended way, because we want people to learn to use and write their stuff using the SharePoint framework. That's where we're heading. And that's where the SharePoint PnP will help you. Why do we want people to do that? And maybe somebody might be thinking that, well, this is the fourth or the third version of a new development platform, which they introduced again in 5 years. Yeah, why would I believe this is the one? Guess what? We actually built the whole SharePoint Online based on SharePoint Framework. So we are so confident enough that SharePoint Framework is the model that we actually build all of our stuff based on that one as well. And that's the most super cool thing around the SharePoint Framework. We in engineering built our stuff using that one. You get access on exactly the same code, exactly the same APIs, exactly the same models, what the engineering guys are doing. And this is the first time in the SharePoint history when this is actually happening. In the past, engineering was doing whatever they wanted to do, and then we were told you that you need to do farm solutions, or you need to do add-ins, or you need to do sandbox solutions. And that wasn't really fair, because the engineering had so many other options. The SharePoint framework is kind of the same model for first party and for third party meaning partners and customers building stuff on SharePoint. Now, SharePoint PnP will help on that. So what we do in the SharePoint Dev Ecosystem Initiative or SharePoint PnP Initiative, we kind of divide our thinking in 3 different sections. We provide assets and we provide things in these 3 different pillars. And the first one is learn. So we want to make sure that you have enough guidance, enough videos, samples, and all of the written guidance to learn how to do SharePoint customizations in a recommended way. So, and we have social media channels. So if you have challenges, you can actually go and ask a question and we'll help you on that. The second kind of a pillar is reuse. So our initiative, actually, there's a lot of MVPs and there's a lot of other community members who are actively involved within our initiative, and we build reusable components and controls. And these are actually for you to take advantage. So you don't have to start from scratch, and you're able to reuse the learnings as an open source implementations within your customizations as well. If you don't want to use the code as such and you don't want to reference directly open source stuff, you can just pull down the code. The licenses are done in the way that you can absolutely just pull down the code and start an ownership and take a fork of the code and start owning that one completely. Absolutely fine way of reusing as well. We want to provide you a lot of reusable stuff, so you will be successful within your work, and we will increase your productivity. That's really what we want to do with the reuse piece. And the last thing is share. So if you're interested, if you want to give back for the community who's been contributing on behalf of you as well, you can always share back as well. We have had now more than 300 community contributors across the world, and we have more than 40 different companies explicitly mentioned within our messaging as well, which we have a permission to say that, hey, these companies are actually sharing their knowledge across the other people across the world for others to be beneficial. And I'll get back on that one slightly later on the presentation. Now, like mentioned, the PnP is really around addressing the classic challenge. Wouldn't it be great if there would be other people you would actually share your problems with, or other people to learn from? And that's what we want to do with PnP. That's what we want to do with the SharePoint, the whole SharePoint community. Really have a forum, have a channels, have a way for you to ask help and the other people to help you as well. Or if you need to reach out to the engineering, guess what? That's easily doable using the SharePoint PnP as well. As long as you follow up on our, let's say, communication guidances and everything else, you can easily even ask a question from me or somebody else from the team. And if we can help you, we can help you. Obviously, we don't want the PnP to take an ownership of the support story. There is a clear demand for the actual SharePoint Online support, and there's a clear difference on that one. But if you're looking into developing something in SharePoint Online, we're more than willing to help you to be successful on that one. And the key point here is also, it's not just around the engineering helping you on the questions. It's also the other people in the community helping with the questions and answering the questions. And that's why we want to have these forums. That's why we want to have GitHub issue lists and Microsoft Tech community forums where people can go and ask questions. And there's other community members who can answer those questions as well. Now, let me actually open up, prepare my demo quickly here. If you're wondering how is the PnP, let's say, community, what is the PnP community actually doing? So we've been existing since 2013. Like mentioned, we started as a two guys or one guy originally, then was able to recruit another guy, and we started with small things back in 2013, and then it started expanding. Back in 2016, the PnP ownership moved to the SharePoint engineering, and 2017 we essentially now own the whole end-to-end story around the SharePoint development. We provide more than 300 samples to learn and to take advantage in your work. And a lot of these samples are actually ready to use, production-ready things. And they might actually address the most important question what you're thinking. How would I access a user profile? How would I do a search REST query API? Guess what? There might be a sample for it. So you can actually go and figure out and use the search tools to find a sample, and that might get you unplugged. If it doesn't get you unplugged, you can always ask help from our community channels as well. We had more than 29,000 unique visitors during the past 2 weeks in the SharePoint organization repositories in the GitHub. That's actually already past that, because in the October numbers, we passed, I think, 33,000 unique visitors in the GitHub. So people are using this stuff. If you're not familiar of what's in a GitHub, we would absolutely like you to go and check it out. You don't have to understand how the GitHub works. You can just download the samples and take advantage of them. That's one way to actually benefit out of what we do. There's no requirements for you to actually contribute back and learn how to use GitHub or how to do open source. We have more than 300 contributors, like mentioned, in the GitHub organizations in the GitHub site, so community people helping on this open source initiative. We have more than 20,000 tenants using PnP reusable components in SharePoint Online. We don't know how many customers are using stuff in on-premises because we can't obviously trace that, because that would be a violation of whatever rules. And we have more than 4.2 billion requests in the PnP reusable controls during August 2017. Actually, in October, we passed 5 billion. So the growth rate is pretty high from a user's perspective. And that shows you that people are finding the stuff useful, which should be helping you on getting interested, on maybe having a look and maybe being more successful within your work by using this stuff with what the other people in the community are using as well. Now, the other things in our pillars. So the next thing what we're going to go through, or the first thing in what we're going to go through, was to learn. So let's actually quickly have a look on what kind of assets we have available for you to learn within the learn to do the SharePoint development in SharePoint Online and also in on-premises. So first of all, we are now consolidating all of our SharePoint development documentation into a single location. So MSDN is no longer the actively used environment, and it's going to be, unfortunately, shut down relatively soon, or it's going to be locked. So all of our active documentation is moving now to docs.microsoft.com. And if you go /SharePoint/dev, you land at our dev documentation. And that's where you can actually find guidance around SharePoint add-ins, SharePoint Framework, getting started on SharePoint Framework implementation. There's declarative customization guidance as well. And we are consolidating all of our future documentation efforts in here, making sure that there's only one location to remember, and you can always find all of the relevant things from that location. The other things from a reusability perspective and learning perspective is the videos and webcasts. We actually do have a weekly webcast in the SharePoint PnP community webcast where people can drop by and ask questions. Typically, we have demos, we have reusable stuff there. We're demonstrating with community demos as well. And that's one side of the videos what we're producing. There's a lot of guidance videos, there's training videos, there's tutorial videos, which are available within our YouTube channel. We had 145,000 minutes watch time last month within this YouTube video channel, which is actually quite a lot. So it's surprisingly popular, and apparently people are finding the videos highly useful. And we're trying to produce videos on, let's say, typical things. So yesterday I released a video around, hey, how would I do F5 debugging in SharePoint Framework using Visual Studio Code? And within the video, which is 9 minutes long, I walk through, this is what it means, this is how you do that, this is how you set your breakpoints, and this is what happens. And there's a lot of other stuff there as well, which should help you to learn how to be successful within the SharePoint framework, and it's all free. There's no costs related on this one. I think we're roughly in 225 videos in this YouTube channel already. Now, other stuff, samples and solution, like mentioned in the previous numbers, we have more than 300 samples available. Some of it is in adding models, some of it is in console applications, some of it is showing REST API, some of it is showing SharePoint framework stuff, and so on, and PnP PowerShell and the scripts and all of other stuff as well. So there's a lot of stuff for you to actually use and have a reference solutions, how to get started on doing development in recommended ways. Now, let's actually have a quick look on these assets, what it actually means, and a few other things which I wanted to quickly pinpoint from an internet perspective, so you will be aware where to find the information. So let me share my screen, and Mike is going to confirm whenever the screen sharing is ready. Which gives me some time to breathe.
All right, looks like it's trying to come up, and I've got my eye on the screen, and I'm seeing SharePoint development. So
cool.
Excellent.
Yes. So this is the SharePoint development. This is, like mentioned, this is the replacement of MSDN. MSDN is super old, and it's outdated system, so we needed to replace that. And what's cool about the docs.microsoft.com, I'm going to zoom in on the URL as well, docs.microsoft.com, let me actually just click that one, is that you can actually contribute back. So there's multiple ways for you to contribute back. You will actually get credits out of doing that as well. So as an example, if I go to the SharePoint framework and we'll have a look on the overview, or let's say roadmap, you can see all of the people who contributed on this page. If there's an issue, if there's a typo or whatever in the page, you can always click edit. And that will redirect you to the GitHub where the document actually is stored. And from here, you're able to submit either a pull request, which is a suggestion of a change within the documentation, or then you can go to the issue list and register and ask a question around something which you can't make to work. And this is super valuable for you as well. So we in SharePoint Engineering, we actually replicate all of the issues from this issue list to our Visual Studio Online, and we'll have a look on, is it an actual bug? Is it something which we can close? And or is it something critical? And we'll act and triage these things based on that. Super valuable thing for you, a super valuable resource for you to ask questions as well. And there's a lot of other community people in here helping with those questions as well. MVPs, other people helping on making sure that your stuff is getting answered. Hopefully, you don't have to go to that issue list too often, and we can actually, for example, help you to get started, for example, with SharePoint Framework web part development, which in the written format, these things are telling you how to get started, what are the things you need to install to get started on SharePoint Framework. And there's even a YouTube video channel and the recorded videos around those tutorials as well. So these are, as an example, this is exactly the same tutorial, but it's in a written format in the documentations, but it's actually recorded in the YouTube and explaining additional values and giving you additional insights on what's actually happening. So you're able to follow up on this as well. Now, other stuff in YouTube, like mentioned, there's more than 200 videos in here. Easiest way probably to remember is AKMS, let me actually do this, SPDev videos. So it's probably the easiest URL to remember, SPDev-videos. If I click that one, you will land into the YouTube channel. And in here, there's a lot of stuff. We do weekly webcasts on specific topics. We do tutorials and training videos. There's new PnP short videos, like the one which I just mentioned, which is around debugging SharePoint Framework. There's a lot of additional guidances and videos here as well. Office 365 CDN, how to get started with that one, walking through those things. And we're releasing new videos here all the time. So super, super valuable thing for you to know. Now, and obviously subscribe or whatever the way is how you follow up on this channel. Now, what else do we actually have? So we had the GitHub. So github.com/SharePoint, more than 300 samples for you to take advantage. So let's say that you want to implement something as a SharePoint Framework web part. You go to the SPDEF FX web parts, samples, and in here you can actually find quite a lot of different kind of web part samples which you can use to learn from. So, and these are showing simple things. Some of them might be complex thing, but some of them might be a simple thing to actually get started on the development. It really, again, depends on the sample, and all of the samples they do have typically even a GIF animation. There will be always a screenshot because we demand on that, but there might be a GIF animation which is explaining what's actually happening and how you can modify things and what the web sample is actually demonstrating. So it's super valuable stuff for you to take advantage. Or if it's around the SharePoint Framework extensions, there's a separate repository for that one. Something new today, this was released 3 hours ago, which is around SharePoint column formatting samples, how to modify column rendering using JSON files. And this is explaining and sharing those samples, and there's a documentation for that. Good example of the stuff, what is available for you to take advantage. Now, after all of these things, you might learn to use the SharePoint framework, and then you will have a massive amount of new ideas. This is what I want to actually do with SharePoint in the future. Please remember also to give us feedback around the missing capabilities and around the capabilities which you need to have. So rather than complaining around the fact that Microsoft doesn't get it, please do go to user voice, go to the GitHub, go to the social media channels, and let us know. We actually want to hear what is the thing which isn't working or what we should be improving. And based on that, we can actually prioritize our work. If you go to the sharepoint.uservoice.com, as an example, if you go here for the SharePoint dev platform, we are actually prioritizing a lot of our future tasks based on these votes which are in the user voice. For some of this stuff is already in the pipeline. Some of the stuff we're still collecting votes, and then we're prioritizing that based on the resources what we're having. So if something is missing, please come in here and have a look, and then you can always cast another vote and an idea for the functionality which might be missing in SharePoint Online. Good. Let's go back on the slides, and I'll do another quick demo pretty soon, but let's get back on the slides for a second. So I'm going to flip here, and Micah is going to tell me whenever the slides are back. That shouldn't take too long. Dun, dun. Loading.
Yeah, we see them.
Excellent. Thank you. So other stuff. So if you think about the PnP, the second kind of a big pillar, what we want to do with SharePoint PnP is the reuse. And this is really for improving your productivity, for making sure that you'll be successful by providing you a reusable controls, reusable components in managed code or in the .NET code or in the NPM or Node code. I'm not going to actually walk through all of the stuff what we have as a reusable component, but basically just quickly having a look at some of these things which are on the slides. We provide PnP controls. That's around reusable controls for SharePoint Framework. So you don't have to implement all of the UI elements by yourself. You don't have to implement taxonomy picker, for example, for your web part. You'll just reuse the control which is available for you. It's an open source control provided for you by SharePoint Engineering together with community members. PnP PowerShell, that's 300 additional PowerShell commandlets for help you to script and automate stuff against SharePoint Online, SharePoint on-premises as well. The PnP PowerShell has different versions for SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2016 and SharePoint Online. And it actually gives you a lot of power to automate stuff against the actual sites, not just the administrative operations, but also let's create lists, let's create items on a list, let's modify the permissions of the sites. PnP PowerShell, super easy thing to do. PnP solutions, reference solutions for SharePoint Framework. That's a relatively new initiative and was released in Ignite. More polished SharePoint Framework samples, which you can use as such as a reference solution. PnP.js Core, JavaScript library which will help you to learn to do JavaScript development if you are, let's say in quotes, old school SharePoint developer. You're not super familiar of JavaScript development, maybe you want to have a look on the PnP JavaScript Core because actually it is proven to help people to learn JavaScript development because it aligns the JavaScript development more on the .NET development. And if you're not familiar with that, have a look. You'll understand when you have a close look on the library why it feels like you're still writing C#. PnP SiteScore, CSOM extension for managed code, PnP Partnerback reference solution for provisioning and branding handling in SharePoint Online. TDPR Hub, it's a reference solution for SharePoint Framework and modern experiences. PnP samples, that's the 300 samples which are available. Extension samples, web part samples, build extensions, PnP tools. There's a lot of stuff which can take advantage. If you have a look on what's available in the GitHub, what's available within the SharePoint, within our landing pages, or quite simply, if you remember one URL, which is AKMS SPPnP. That's our welcome page in the dev.office.com, which will list you all of the resources and links and everything else which are available. So super, we recommend people to have a look on what's actually available so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody might actually already done what you're looking for. And that's really the key point here. Now, let's have a quick look on one of the samples. I'm just being conscious about the time, but I think we'll be fine actually. I'm gonna because I want to do 2 demos. It's around reusable controls for SharePoint Framework, and then end-to-end modern experiences provisioning story. So I'm going to flip back on my screen again. Michael is going to tell me whenever my screen sharing is back. And let's actually go to the GitHub, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to share. There we go. Takes a while to go through to the other side. And this is my last demo.
Yep, we're seeing it now.
Excellent. So in the GitHub, one of the things what we mentioned in the reusable control, in the reusable solutions side was the controls. So this is a good example of what we want to do. So here's controls. We have 2 different kind of controls. We have property controls and the context controls. I'm going to use the property controls as the example so you'll understand what's actually available. We work together with MVPs and community people. In this case, this initiative was started or has really been driven by Elio for time being, but we're looking into extending that one in the future as well. But what the property controls are doing is that it provides a set of controls which are reusable for you to take advantage when you're implementing SharePoint Framework web parts. So as an example, think about the scenario that you have a web part which will change its behavior based on a selected term store value. And you want to have a term picker, and you want to have a picker for the term store terms. Or this might be something which is actually exposed in a web part context as well, theoretically, but right now looking into the property field taxonomy picker. How long it would actually take you to write this kind of a picker for the client-side web part. There's a selection of the property. If you click that one, it will show you all of the taxonomies, and then you're able to select one or more terms. Probably it would actually take quite a long time. It's not a trivial thing. This doesn't happen actually in a matter of hours. Guess what? We're providing this for you for free to reuse. So you're able to actually reference this control package from NPM, and you're able to actually use it within your web parts without any additional things other than referencing that within the web parts, and you'll be good to go. All of this code is being reviewed. It's open source community-driven code, but it's being reviewed by our engineering people. So we want to actually provide support. Well, we don't technically provide product support for this. We're providing community support for this, but engineering people are looking into and reviewing the code that it's actually working properly for the future as well. So for this particular example, here's a relatively simple web part. I'm going to actually show you this one in practice in the context of SharePoint. So this is one of the web parts which is available, which is using the PnP controls in practice. So as an example, let's have a look on how it actually looks. So I'm going to do gulp serve no browser because I don't want to open up my local workbench. This is going to quickly bundle the code and it's going to start hosting the web part from my local host. While it's doing that, I'm going to jump actually to one of my tenants. And in here, I'm going to actually go, I'm going to go to my SharePoint Online workbench, which I can use to host and test my web part, which is now hosted from my local host. So from my local host, I'm now running this code, which is now in Visual Studio Code, which is then using the reusable controls, which is provided as a package, almost like a NuGet package from NuGet Gallery, but in this case, NPM package from NPM Gallery. So the reusable fellow here, let's have a look on how it looks first, and then we can quickly modify that slightly, and you'll understand the value of these reusable controls. So this is a preview tenant. There's a lot of additional stuff which isn't available in normal tenants, but I can use the PnP controls web part here. And you can see that there's a nice control which is available for you as well, which is placeholder control, which is actually rendering this nice UI here. And then there are list selection control, and then there's a term control and term picker control. And this is relatively complex control. So considering the fact that how long it would actually take you to write this, it actually goes against the SharePoint Online taxonomy story. And then it actually, you're able to select one, in this case, one or more terms for the property. So let's do something like select department and software. And we can actually close that. And now the property of the software has been then selected for the web part. And based on the selection, there will be changes within the web part behavior. While we're actually testing this, I'm going to select the documents. I'm going to click apply just to show you how things are working. Now it's saying no items found. The software is being selected. Now, how long it would have taken you to actually implement this kind of a control? Probably quite a long time, but you can actually use this as such. And how difficult or how easy it is to use these controls? Let's have a look on this particular case. So I'm going to jump back on my code. I'm going to open up the web part. Let me scroll down to terminal. And the property term picker, how did we get it actually in the web part? We are inheriting or importing that from our package, which is the PnP SPFX property controls. Scrolling down in my code, I can actually see that there's a definition for the property field term picker. And this is all what you need to do. You don't need to understand where the terms are actually coming. You don't need to understand how to render the terms. You'll just put this control here and it will take care of the whole experience. Plus the fact that if I modify now the settings here, like the allow multiple selection, if I put this one in true and let's save, we can see that the Visual Studio Code is now recompiling, or Webpack essentially is re-transforming the TypeScript to JavaScript. And when that's completed, we can actually go to the SharePoint Online site. Let's refresh the page so we get a new version of the web part here. Let's modify the web part. Let's actually go to the term selection. And because we selected now that we can select multiple terms, we can select multiple terms. So you as a developer, again, you don't have to worry about where the terms are coming. How did we modify this? How do you store multiple things? There we go. The property has been properly set, and you're able to take advantage of that within your code. That's really the key point of these reusable controls, reusable values, what we're providing. Now, the other example on the reusable code, let's have a end-to-end scenario for modern SharePoint team experiences. So one of the things what you might have been aware in SharePoint Online is that we've been gradually introducing modern SharePoint Online experiences. So this is a modern team site called Helsinki. I live in Helsinki, that's why it's called Helsinki in this case. But it's using the modern experiences. One of the classic scenarios where people are saying, I can't go to the modern experiences in SharePoint Online because I can't customize that. Guess what? You can. The story has slightly evolved, especially since Ignite releases, and you are able to modify the whole experience based on your business requirements. So let me walk through the process first, and I'm going to then explain what's happening here and how did we make this happen. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the SharePoint homepage. I'm going to create a new site. And you probably, if you're a developer, it's a quite common scenario that, hey, whenever there's a new site created, I want it to use my brand. I want it to use some of my customizations, like I want to have a custom web part on the page and some sample content on the page as well. Now, starting pretty soon, you will have a capability called site design. And the site design capability gives you essentially new template options in SharePoint Online. And the site design capability will support some level of a configuration. So you're able to say, hey, I need to create a new list whenever a site is getting created, or I need to create or use a specific theme or color theme whenever a site is created. But it also supports extensibility point. And the extensibility point is important because quite often every single customer have their own unique requirements. So you want to actually automate something in Azure side or in your on-premises site whenever a site collection is created in SharePoint Online. And that's where this extensibility point helps. And you're able to also use that to apply additional configuration to the newly created site. So let's do a quick demo. So I'm going to actually select this Condosa Travel site design here. Let's call this Seattle November. Oh, there is already a site called that, Seattle December. Oh, there is already a site called that. So let's do a city from Helsinki. That's fine. Okay. So I'm going to create a new site called Kotka. That is Eagle in Finnish. Now you're learning new stuff in every single call. And let me click the next because I'm creating a new SharePoint, a modern SharePoint site. It's super fast. It's actually already available. So if I click Finish, I will be redirected to the newly created site. And this is where the site design actually starts. So now, in this case, the site design is relatively, well, simple or complex. It depends on a perspective as well. Let's have a look on what the site design actually did. The site design created an additional list for customers tracking. It created another list for customer event information. It added one of the lists, both of the lists to the left navigation. It also triggered a flow, which is actually our extensibility point. And it also applied a custom theme called Condosa Programs. So this is something which the tenant administrator was able to configure within a tenant. And in this case, the Condosa Travel has also demanded that, well, I want to have third-party web parts. I want to have a custom web parts and other things on the site. And that's where the flow trigger actually helps. So when the flow trigger actually happens, when the site is created, a flow is actually getting executed. And what that means that there is a flow which is getting executed, then you can define what happens when the flow is getting executed. In this case, we're actually getting whenever the site is getting created, this flow is getting initiated. So this is the step which is getting actually called. What we're doing is that we are creating a list to an item. We're creating a list item to a list where we want to store all of the site collections which are currently created. So that we have the kind of a IT level control on what is getting created. But then we have an extensibility point. We're putting a message on a queue. And so what it means is that we're putting a message on an Azure storage queue. And this is actually super cool because now the Azure storage queue is our extensibility point. And what that means that in Azure side, we can do something as simple as, for example, following. So I can create an Azure function, which is, in this case, it's a PowerShell for Azure function, which is automatically getting executed whenever a new message is put on an Azure storage queue. Looking in here, we have 1, 2, 3 lines of actual code, and then we have some output information from the screen. And what these 3 lines are doing, they are taking advantage of PnP PowerShell. So they are actually connecting back on the SharePoint Online, and then they're applying a PnP provisioning template. Again, awesome example of reusable assets which you can take advantage within your development. And what it's doing is that it's actually applying a custom template on the just newly created site based on the business requirements. So a few lines of code. We can see that that's just happened. So all good, the template has been applied to the Kotka site, so no exceptions in here. So now if I move back on the Kotka site, which was just created, Kotka meant eagle in Finnish or in English, or whatever I want to translate that on which direction. If I click finish, not finish, we can actually see that the site is now created and there's few cool things which just happened. So you can see that the welcome page has been modified. It's now saying welcome to Contoso team sign. You can see that there's a completely different web part. This is a Bing web part, which is pointing to the Ignite location where the Ignite happened. And then there's a third-party custom web part here for task management. There's actually even a custom footer, which could be a header as well in here with the custom navigation elements and whatever. In this case, the footer is relatively simple, but it's saying Contoso confidential in the page. So you can see that we're able to modify where, first of all, we're able to add all of these UI elements on a page. We're able to add our web parts and experiences on a page, and we're able to integrate that business requirement natively to the native provisioning experience with our extensibility points which are available. And that's super, super cool, because what it means is that you can actually take advantage of the modern experiences of SharePoint Online within the SharePoint, based on, even though you would have this kind of customization requirements for your customers or for your own company. Super cool. And hopefully somebody is clapping on the other side saying,
I think that's fantastic.
Yes, we're finally getting there. Cool. Now, we have 8 minutes, so I'm going to flip back on the slides. Let's do a few slides, slightly rushing on them, and I do apologize, and then we can close up for the day. But that's kind of, for me, that has been for a long time the holy grail of the modern experiences. So we have a full control on what is getting actually provisioned, and that's brilliant. Super happy that we were able to finally do it. And pretty soon it's available externally as well. Good. Few slides before we actually close up for today. So the final thing in the PnP was around sharing. Again, we don't demand you to share anything. This is not a mandatory step, but we are asking that, hey, you can certainly just use our stuff and don't contribute back, but you can. If you want to be part of this journey, if you want to help others to be successful with the others in a community, you can do that. You can participate on a discussion in Microsoft Tech community. You can ask a question. Community members are actually helping quite often those questions, and engineering people are answering those questions as well. You can follow up on our progress and our releases and what are we doing in a monthly community call, or within our bi-weekly special interest group community call. Technically, there's a one PnP call at least in every single week happening. There's a bi-weekly special interest group call for SharePoint Framework and bi-weekly special interest group call for SharePoint development every single Thursday morning. If you go to akms/sppnp, which is the URL on the page, you'll find the links for the invites, and then you can drop by and see demos and the stuff which you saw today. We've been going through more detailed what's happening there within those demos, within those community calls as well. Or if you don't want to do that, you want to just use our stuff, which is available in a GitHub, absolutely fine, and report then issues in a GitHub, hopefully. You can absolutely contribute also new samples. There's a lot of people who are contributing new samples from a community side, but you don't have to. We don't demand that from anybody. Now, why would you actually contribute? Well, there's quite a lot of companies who've been with us on this journey, and they actually get acknowledged and they get credits in our monthly communications. So every single month, we'll do a monthly summary in the dev.office.com/blogs, so in the Office blog, official Office blog location, where we then give credits for the individual people who've contributed and for those companies which we have a permission to use their logo as well. So basically, we can't get you money back, but this is how the open source work. We can give you credits back. We can mention that you helped other people to be successful as well. And you can see quite a lot of quite a lot of SharePoint companies who've been helping us on this journey, making other people in the community successful as well. Now, closing in, 3 things to remember. If you're looking into doing SharePoint Framework, if you're looking into doing anything in SharePoint development site, please use their existing assets. We provide learning material, we provide reusable components, and you can always share pack as well. That will at least make you feel better because you helped somebody else by maybe answering his questions in the tech community or providing an issue and reporting an issue which we were unaware. Super valuable for us as well. We've been using this slogan for years. I don't know if you've seen that in our messaging in the past. Sharing is caring, and hopefully you agree on that one. AKMS SPPNP is the one URL to remember where you can find additional information, and it's the one URL where we have all the videos, links, and everything else available for you as well. I think that's it for this one. On time. This is
very
rare.
good. That's awesome sharing. Great resources, and just love the demo. So we've got maybe just a couple of minutes. You mind if I just ask 1 or 2 questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. So just to clarify on the feature pack 2, so does that mean our partners can start developing web parts today on-prem with feature pack 2, and that's going to be future-proof? They're going to be able to move those to SharePoint Online?
Yes, that's exactly what it means. So if you install SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 2, you can host SharePoint Framework web parts in the classic SharePoint pages in on-premises. So the modern experience is modern UI isn't there, but your web parts will work actually in on-premises and also in cloud. The same web part will work already today in on-premises and in the cloud, and that's super cool.
Excellent. So I know you can't see it, but we're getting some really good feedback coming in. Awesome content, says Jeanette. Thank you so much. So that's great, and a lot of some positive feedback coming in. Appreciate it. And then maybe as we close out, so you mentioned earlier about I think you call them old school SharePoint developers. Well, I'm definitely one of those. I'm definitely one of those guys, right? I grew up with SharePoint and come from that classic C# background, did a lot of server side and full trust solutions. And so as we kind of move into these modern experiences and modern development, do you have any comments or tips that you would give on kind of where to start? Should I take a look at what's there in PnP and maybe pick off, the starting series about getting started with the SharePoint framework, use build the sample web part and check out the workbench? Should I go learn TypeScript? So what comments or tips would you have? So just to clarify, I actually come from the old same background as well. So I started as a farm solution developer, and I've been struggling as well because I know that it's hard. But I would say one of the things what maybe is in some of the messaging is failing. Technically, you don't need to understand what is TypeScript. You don't need to understand what's NPM, because let's face it, I never understood how MS Build actually worked in .NET development. I had no clue. In the same way, you don't need to understand what is gulp. You just know how to use the gulp for your benefit, and that's fine. That's enough. So I think that would help people to understand that, well, actually there isn't that many things what I need to learn to be successful already. And sure, you can learn what is a gulp in the following steps and learn more deeper knowledge around the framework. I would say that start with our tutorials. Start with the written tutorials, and you can use the video tutorials to help you with those. Not all of the videos are unfortunately quite up to date, and the written tutorials are always up to date, and they should be up to date. We're updating videos as we move along. But going there, creating a web part, getting started with the web part development, creating an extension, testing how the extension works, getting the understanding that, okay, this is how it works. And that's probably the best way of approaching that. And the one thing which I would highly recommend, and I do know that it's super hard because I used to be on the same boat, is try to get over the denial to the acceptance phase, because we'll get there. It helps. It is painful. Yes, I get that. And I was wrong. I was really long in the adding model transition.
I was in a denial phase for a long time. And it's no, this cannot be happening. And then when I got over it, it's like, okay, fine, this is where we're heading. And this is where we're heading. And that's really the key point what people should be understanding. SharePoint Framework is the fundamental piece which we use in engineering as well. We're not going to drop that. We're not going to drop suddenly whole SharePoint. That's impossible because we build our stuff on top of the SharePoint Framework. That means that we're betting our future on SharePoint Framework, which means that it's a safe bet for you as well if you're planning to be in SharePoint. Hopefully that it makes sense.
Yes, all right, great advice. And thank you again for supporting our U.S. partner community. And please go ahead and fill out those survey poll questions. And we will see you next month. And thank you so much again, Vesa. Great presentation, great content.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody, for joining as well. Thank you.
All right. Good night to you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.